Hello, my name is Matthew Kidman and welcome to the latest episode of Success and More Interesting Stuff brought to you by Livewire Markets. Traditionally on the show, we talk to people who are involved in some shape or form with the share market. Today, we are excitedly going off-piste and delving into the unlisted world and one of Australia's outstanding success stories. In 2008, Lina Calabria and two partners decided to start 9 separate businesses. As consultants, they had plenty of bright ideas and thought creating a portfolio of companies, while unorthodox, was a low-risk way to make a success. Within a few years, they selected Bellroy, an accessories business that specialised in male wallets, as the pick of the bunch. From those humble beginnings, Bellroy, named by combining Bells Beach and Fitzroy, has grown into a global brand with more than 130 million in sales. It sells in dozens of countries and has created its own category called carry. In other words, they design products that you carry around with you. Slim wallets, backpacks, work bags, duffel bags, totes, passport holders and phone cases. Niche, but nicely profitable. Calabria, born to Italian immigrants, started life as an only child in the northwestern suburbs of Melbourne. She excelled at maths and science and decided to study engineering at Melbourne University. A male-dominated course, Calabria ploughed ahead and landed a job consulting to companies about logistics and supply chain. This took her around the world looking at all types of businesses. University was also where she met her future business and life partner, Matt. A decade on with 2 children, Lina and Matt, together with Matt's brother Andy, decided to start their 9 best business ideas. As engineers, they love to analyse and have used extensive data, applying it to the business world with great effect. Today, Calabria sees great opportunity to expand Bellroy in both products and countries, and she believes doubling and possibly tripling the business is a realistic goal. Welcome, Lina.
Fair enough.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, we've got to give you a positive outlook as a small business growing, and it's been a terrific story. Yep. Now, carry.
Yep.
What do you carry?
Well, it changes day to day. You know, I've just flown in from Melbourne, so there's laptops and some chargers, drink bottle, phone, all those kinds of things. Sometimes on the weekend, it's like groceries. Sometimes it's like the burdens of life. So it's not always the physical things, but maybe sometimes the mental things. The stuff we carry changes across the different days that you're traveling around.
Yeah, and so when we talked a week or two before today, and I thought, what do I carry? And not much, unfortunately. But I did think about it today. I've got a carry bag here with us today. Yeah. Unfortunately, Ted Baker, but I didn't buy it. And I've got an old wallet that needs updating with the zippers broken. Now, we did talk about, so I'm not doing well enough for Bellroy.
We can 100% solve these problems. These are solvable problems.
But I did think about it. You did kick off in those early days with a wallet, a slim-fitting wallet, which was, and we'll get to it a bit later.
Yeah.
But I thought wallets were maybe finished. I look at my wife, Susie, and she used to carry a big fat wallet, and now she's just got cards shoved in her phone, which is another carry case, I know.
Yeah.
But the wallet hasn't died.
No, I think that, we've been going at this for a while. You know, it's sort of coming up to 14 years this year. And wallets were a little bit more of a standard shape that people used to use back in the beginning. You know, you'd have lots of notes, you'd probably have some receipts stuffed into it, you'd have all your different cards. And what we were encouraging people to do is to slim their wallets and to go from a really big chunky wallet to something a bit smaller. It sort of made sense at the time as well. Skinny jeans were in. People didn't want like a big, massive wallet in their pocket. And we used to talk about like people having back issues from sitting on huge wallets. But what has happened over time is that some people still like a really traditional wallet, but some people have slimmed down and they take photos of their receipts. And so they may be just carrying some cash and cards. And some people don't carry cash anymore and they're just carrying cards. And some people don't carry cards anymore and they're just carrying phones. And so I think 15 years ago, wallets were really quite standard in their shape. But I think what a wallet means today to someone sort of depends on how they carry and what they value. And your wife probably is on the slimming wallet journey. So we got something for her at the slimmer end as well. You know, it doesn't have to be the big heavy folio that she has to carry.
Well, it's interesting. You wouldn't think technology would disrupt something as simple as the wallet.
But it totally did. And, not only technology, but I think COVID so there was the technology that kind of played with the card side of things. And then COVID came along and sort of made it yuck to touch money that other people had touched. And so I think for us, we love the idea of people slimming down and carry less. Like, we don't want you carrying heaps of stuff through your day. We want you carrying what you need well, and that's kind of it. And so carrying less is a good outcome for us. I think if we get to, like, maybe we're in a VR world one day where, we don't carry anything, we don't move anywhere. I think there are problems with that world. But up until that point, I think it's good to carry less. Like, that sort of works well.
What I've found is that you carry most of your cards on your phone, but I've found when I'm not at home, I end up putting a credit card in my pocket.
Yeah.
Because I'm a little bit fearful that I won't be able to charge my phone.
Yeah.
And then I won't be able to pay for something. I'll be stuck. In the old days, you'd shove some cash in your pocket. Or
and now
wallet.
I kind of keep my credit card in my car, but actually I use my watch to pay. So I don't even I could do it on my phone, but I think often I leave the phone at home and just use the watch. We do make watch straps though, so...
Yeah, they're interesting as well. I've been through the journey on watch straps as well.
As the wallets get smaller, the wallets, will get smaller, and then we went to watch straps and phone cases, and we sort of can follow you around for quite a while with the things that people need to carry.
But let's go back just on yourself. We're talking about Bellroy, the company.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a story pre-Bellroy for you, and we mentioned it in the opening. You grew up in northwest Melbourne, somewhere around the airport.
Yeah.
Essendon region?
Gladstone Park. But yeah, Essendon region.
Is that fair enough?
I went to high school in Essendon, so you're in the zone.
And what was it like in that environment? Very suburban, I gather? It
was very suburban, definitely. Everyone gets around with cars, not a lot of public transport. It was sort of exciting. It was just being a kid, actually. There wasn't a lot to sort of think about and worry about. It was kind of like go to school, come home, play with your friends, ride your bike, play tennis. It was very straightforward.
Great Australian upbringing.
100%. Very straightforward. Like, rode your bike on the street, played tennis on the road, got in trouble by the car who drove past if you didn't get off the road quick enough. Like that sort of stuff.
And not knowing Melbourne as well as I do Sydney, is that an area where most people have a standard job, work for a large organisation, or is it an area that has a lot of small business people, tradespeople, or a bit of a mix?
Do you know what? It's probably evolved a lot over time, because when I was growing up there, I think we were probably about the last suburb before fields and paddocks and, many housing developments yet to come. It felt like probably not a lot of people commuting into the city at that point. I would say more trades, a bunch of people who would have worked at the airport, in sort of airline maintenance and that sort of thing. And quite a bit of industry sort of in the area as well. So probably a bit of factory work.
So, and your parents who have been immigrants from Italy, if I can get this right, they met here.
Yes.
But they went back?
They did. They met here, actually living in Collingwood. So very different to Gladstone Park, actually. You could sort of imagine
Melbourne.
Collingwood in the 50s and the 60s. They sort of were trying to work out, is this where they want to live? They decided to go back to northern Italy to run a coffee bath, and they did that there for sort of maybe 2 or 3 years. My mum will be like, it was 5, but whatever, And they also looked at maybe living in South America in Venezuela, which is where my mum's older brother was living. So they sort of journeyed there for a little bit as well. And in the end, I think they thought, no, the life's probably better in Australia, and that's where we want to go.
Yeah, life is full of good and bad decisions. I get the feeling that was a good one.
That one feels pretty good. I mean, living in northern Italy would be so bad, but it feels pretty good.
But in those days, it might have been a bit tougher. It was a different time.
Exactly.
And your parents, they ran that small business.
Yeah.
But when they were in Australia, they also worked in general jobs.
They did.
Your father worked for Melbourne Council?
Yeah, he was. He worked in the electrical department, sort of fixing electrical things that were part of the city council. My mum was a dressmaker, so she was always making clothes at home. That was what was going on.
There's a little bit of design and creativity in that.
Definitely. I mean, watching it, I didn't even realise how much I'd kind of picked up from watching her with clothes all the time that when I'm at work now and I watch one of our pattern makers and I watch the way she's bringing the bag pattern together, I kind of think, oh, I can see like she's put this dart there for that reason. And I don't know, I feel like the language kind of came through from mum a little bit. So
yeah, just being in that environment.
Yeah.
As you get older, it's amazing how much you take in as a child or an early adult.
You know, you sort of asked me about this sort of childhood existence and I'm like, yeah, you're kind of mucking about on your bike and doing all of that. But what I would say was in my home was a real physicality. And something I like to sort of imagine or think about is like you can never fight physics. You know, if we've got a logistics problem, we have to deal with physics. Or if the bag isn't performing in the way we want, it's physics that we're fighting. It's like we're sort of constrained by that. And when I picture my childhood, you know, I've got my mum kind of making clothes all the time and sort of needing to model them in 3D and lay them out together and imagine that. My dad was very much a handyman at home and sort of would always, I had a little hammer and I'd be sort of hammering nails. And if there was a flat tire on the bike, he would be like, you come and change it. And so there was a lot of the physical world in the house and kind of grappling with
and encouraged by the sounds of it.
Very
solve
much.
Problems.
Definitely, like sort of come and have a look at what's happening or work this out. Or, I mean, sometimes we'd be like, I've got a, you know, I would be like a 7-year-old kid and my dad would come in, nurse, I've got a splinter. I need some help pulling it out. And, you know, he'd ask me to pull it out. I was very brave to ask a little kid to pull out a splinter.
Yeah, splinters are pretty scary.
But he sort of had that vibe. So, yeah.
And engineering, what strand did you take? Because there's all different types of engineering.
Yeah, so at Melbourne Uni, back then, it was a generic first year, and that appealed because I don't know that I really knew what engineering was other than...
Who suggested it?
I think it came from school. You know, it's like, oh, you're good at physics and maths, maybe engineering would be good. I probably did some like league table. I was probably doing a bit of optimizing for what kind of score did I need and how well remunerated was the work and what would you be studying. And I was probably like, you know, medicine just felt like you just had to study way too hard to get marks to get into medicine. Law would be like lots of essays and I was not interested in that. And I sort of saw this engineering thing and thought, yeah, they seem to get pretty paid well and they kind of have interesting jobs. And so I thought, that looks all right. But I didn't really understand exactly what that meant from a career perspective. And so Melbourne Uni was great because that was broad. And then I thought...
Second year you had to make some decisions.
And then in second year, I went down the... So I didn't like the electrical stuff quite so much. Chemical, I didn't like the chemistry quite so... It was a bit of a process of elimination. The mechanical felt interesting. So I went down that path and chose mechanical. And then in the final year, sort of rather than doing lots of thermodynamics and maths that actually got very hard, there was an option to specialise in part in manufacturing. And so the degree that I got in the end was mechanical and manufacturing, which, again, I sort of fell into. I didn't really realise how much that would end up influencing how important products were in my life. But that's what the manufacturing degree really brought.
It served you quite well.
I mean, it's fascinating. It's funny how the thread kind of continues because a lot of that was about what are the rules of physics and how do they kind of govern how the world works. And then if you actually need to make something over and over again in high quality, how do you do that? Mm-hmm. They're sort of the two things that we were answering in that degree.
You went from there,
yep,
and then you went into consultancy,
yep,
which once again was a bit of an eye opener for you.
It was an amazing,
because you got to travel around, see different businesses. Do you want to put some colour around that and what you learned?
I remember seeing this ad. I was sitting on the floor at my parents' house watching TV, looking through the Age classifieds for ads for jobs that I might apply to. Like
now you're giving away your age.
Totally. And I saw this ad and I thought that looks kind of interesting. And it was, so the company was SMT Consulting. It was started by a couple of really interesting partners who'd come out of Deloitte and sort of formed this boutique consulting business, and we were doing supply chain consulting. And again, I kind of thought that looks like pretty good money, and it sort of pitched it at solving interesting problems and seeing challenges. And I thought, seems kind of good. I wondered if they'd, I didn't know if I'd get the job or not. And I guess, that worked out okay. But we very quickly were working for some of the names that we still know today, like Australia Post was a client, Pfizer was a client, the Australia Post work we ended up doing with Royal Mail. And it was very much about how do you organise an operation to function more effectively, whether it be to get more throughput or to reduce cost. At that time, at that job, I did so much learning about this sounds crazy boring, but inventory management. Everyone's just turned off at that point. But about inventory management, and for a product business, having the right stock in the right place is like critical, because you can spend all your time in the world trying to generate demand and convince people to buy it. But if the stock's not actually there to buy, you're very often going to lose the sale. And then the counter is that if you mess it up, all of your cash is in inventory. And so inventory for a product business is sort of this, I think, never talked about beacon for good management. If you can find a business that has excellent inventory levels and not too much cash tied up in inventory, that's a little beacon for how the hell are they getting that right, because you've really got to know what you're doing to get it right, and no one talks about it or teaches it. But that's what I learned in the consulting job, amongst other things.
Yeah, I know from the investment side, we spend a lot of time trying to work out what the working capital looks like, which is another way of looking at that.
Yeah.
It's a bit harder to tell from accounts, but tell me one thing before we move on. Is it better to have, or is it worse, maybe is the question, too much inventory or not enough inventory to sell at the time? What scares you most?
Having not enough is better in some ways because it's a solvable problem. You can then calculate how much you need and buy it, right? So it's bad in the minute, but if you see not enough inventory, it's like, okay, we know what we have to do. Let's fix the process and buy it. Having too much inventory, that's a harder problem to solve, because it means that you probably think you have a whole lot of asset that actually needs to be written down to something like 20% of its value. And there's no way to solve for that. If you've got stock that nobody wants to buy, that is hard to solve. So seeing too much stock, I think that's worse than not enough stock.
So that can make you feel a bit ill at times.
It would make me feel ill. If I saw our stock number climbing and climbing and climbing, that would be a definite, we need to do something about that flag.
And you went from that job and you cut your teeth on businesses, your own businesses rather than consulting.
Yeah.
And ended up, correct me if I'm wrong, but you ended up running one of the Falshaw's businesses.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I ended up as their supply chain manager. So not running it,
because they had their own business.
They did. So the business is Falshaw Wheels and Casters. It still exists, and Matt and Andy's
Matt's brother,
Andy, and sister Jo now runs it. She runs that business. It's in Sunshine. It's been, I think she's third generation. And Matt and I were both working at SMT. He also had joined me in that consulting job after about 6 months, because it was great fun. And so we were traveling a lot. That's what was going on. And their dad was getting sick. He was unwell. And so it felt like actually working in Falshaw and putting into place, as in Falshaw Wheels and Casters, putting into place all of the things we'd been doing through SMT, all of the inventory management ideas, all of the production planning ideas, would be a really fun way to generate some value. And so Matt ended up as the press shop manager at Falshaw, and I was the supply chain manager. Jo ended up being the managing director and still runs it today. But it's such an amazing business because it has a press shop, which is you get like big coils of steel and big heavy presses, cut out shapes. It has injection molding, so you make rubber, wheels, and then it had an assembly plant where you kind of assemble them together. So in terms of like learning about how to make something is super fascinating.
Sounded like an engineer's dream.
It was great fun.
Bringing all stuff together.
Yeah. It was really great.
And then they bought another business and they put you in as CEO, or you put your hand up?
Yeah, exactly. So we then bought another business called Electrodrive. We bought it within Falshaw. I think Rob was pretty sick by that point, maybe no longer in the business. And then I went and ran Electrodrive.
And what'd you learn from that?
It was a smaller business, it's probably like 20 staff. We were making pretty serious equipment. We were making equipment to move hospital beds all the way through to light planes. So it was sort of towing equipment. I actually learnt that it's really hard to do big things with small teams because it was hard work every day because every person has to do 5 different jobs. And some people in the company are right there for that. And others are like, I just want to do my job. So it was hard. It was a hustle. It was
It's a real lesson, isn't it? You got to be a generalist.
You really do. In those early days,
Yep.
you have to be such a generalist. And you just can't be like, that's not my job.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And only certain people can handle it. Well, let's get to the really exciting bit when you branch out. There was obviously a catalyst. I think, Joe, you were talking about Falshaw ended up buying.
Yeah, so Joe bought that business off the siblings. And so then that left us thinking,
what do we do?
What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Yeah, nothing to do.
And you came up with the strange idea, but the one you went with, let's start a bunch of businesses.
Yeah.
9 is the number you
quote.
quote.
The end. I'm not sure we said it. Yeah, that kind of just
There wasn't a
going.
magical number one night. It just happened that way.
Yeah.
A bit of flavour. What did they look like? Obviously Bellroy, which we'll talk a lot more about.
Yeah. So one of them was basically a tech consulting business. So doing app development and website development. A few ideas spun out of that we turned into little mini businesses. We partnered with our friend, Matt's friend, our friend now, on a business called a website really called Radiopedia, and we kind of helped him build that. So there was a lot of sort of ideas that spun out of the fact that we had a tech shop that could build things. We had a dental supplies business because we had a friend who was in Dental Corp, and he said, hey, there's an opportunity to consolidate dental supplies. So we were sort of like keeping our eyes open for what's going on in the world and where are there opportunities to like light a little fire and see if one of them catches.
And Bellroy caught fire.
Bellroy caught, yes.
Yeah, so my timeline might be a bit out, but over a couple of years, Bellroy kind of stuck its head up and said,
yeah.
So there was a moment though,
Definitely.
That the light went on and said, we can do something here.
Yep.
And there was a couple of steps to that, I gather, where you decided on the wallet as the first product and then advertising it.
Yep.
And it took off. So that was a little bit of a surprise.
I would say there were two there are 3 insights on that little path, maybe I would even say. There were 6 in it. There were, I'll keep it to 3. So I think the first idea was that we really thought carry, which, we kind of started our combo today playing with that idea, but we thought carry was really interesting. And we wanted to create a business that would ultimately be uniting various market segments into this place called carry. So we thought we were actually going to start Bellroy with bags, and then Insight 1 was Andy coming back and saying, no, actually, I think it's wallets. I think Insight 2 was watching after we'd launched, watching how happy the customers seemed to be with the product. We just kept getting good reviews from, it's friends and family in the beginning, and like the design shop in your neighborhood who you know really well. And we were looking at what we were doing and people were saying, we really love this product. And that just felt super important as not a thing that you can deliberately create or that is necessarily the thing you get. But we had that. And then probably about 18 months in, because we had this tech consulting business that was still sort of running, we sort of had some staff who were working a bit in the tech business, a bit in Bellroy, helping out with whatever Bellroy needed. And one of them said, we should try Google Ads. And
so where are we now? About 2010?
11.
11, yeah.
2011. And actually a sort of a tech person and a creative person and a brand person, the 3 of them sort of got together, like there's probably a few others around that kitchen table at that time, and came up with the Slim Your Wallet campaign. So they sort of, the issue that we had with Google Ads was that we felt nervous that it was going to be bad for brand. This was when digital advertising hadn't really started yet. It was all sort of blue text at the top of search results. And we were a bit nervous about whether it would be the thing for our new baby brand that we were trying to nurture. And so we said, well, what if we actually created a campaign and created a landing page and created an experience that meant if you clicked on that ad, you'd really get a deep brand experience. And we did. That was the thing that we went live with. And I think we were very surprised at how quickly that changed our growth. I remember the numbers. We were selling 7 wallets a day on the website pre that program. And I think within a week or 2, that number had gone to 30. And those numbers feel tiny relative to today's world, but that was,
Just to put in perspective, I think we're talking about that today, obviously a lot more products that you've got, but you're in the thousands.
Yes, per day. Yeah. So 7 a day is,
7 to 30 is quite exciting.
Yeah, but it's 4 times like within a month, and it really changed things. It showed us, I guess, what generating demand would look like, and that actually the demand was sort of there and waiting for us to go and find it.
2 questions out of that. First one is to do with Google. At that stage, do you get worried that Google ends up controlling your business as your distribution point, or were you on top of that?
Well, we were in 2010 when we launched, but we've been thinking about this thing, say, since 2008. We designed Bellroy as a wholesale business, and so we had a website because that was a thing to do, but we didn't start thinking we were going to be selling on Bellroy.com. We thought wholesale was the thing we designed the business to fulfill, which again is sort of an age-showing thing because that's not how product businesses are started now. And so I think when this Google thing worked, it probably, maybe it was still smaller than the wholesale orders we'd been receiving. And so it just felt like some cream on top. We were not even close to thinking about Google's going to control this because it sort of was that scrappy thing in the corner that we'd given a little bit of time to.
And it was probably early stages for small businesses in Australia to feel that way.
Yeah, very much so.
That probably came later. The second part was going back to your expertise of supply chain management and distribution.
Yeah.
You made the decision not to do it yourself, that you would outsource this.
We did. And I think, I guess I learned quite a lot about managing a warehouse operation and running a factory. And I guess what I could see was that they were 2 very different styles of business and 2 very different drivers around what culture would work. And, if we wanted to be located in a city to attract sort of designers and creatives, then how are we going to have a warehouse attached to that and have that be economical? And it felt like being able to have designers who would design the product and creatives who would tell our story was probably the thing that we needed to own, because we needed to own the brand. And it felt like the warehousing, when we started, it was 20 boxes of product on a tiny shelf somewhere. And it felt like that was the thing that we didn't have to control the brand. And so we used third-party logistics from the beginning. Yeah,
which is an interesting way of going because you've got to make decisions, 1 around inventory, but 2 around cost.
Yeah.
And is that the right way to go? And when you're small, cost is a big part of the equation because capital's tight.
Yeah, but I actually think we probably saved money using a third-party logistics service right from the beginning because, the orders were, I think that it was $1 a pick or something like that. And we would have had to have employed a person to do an hour a day of work. And so I felt like we just couldn't scale that in a way that made sense right at the beginning. So while it might have created more cost sort of at the contribution margin level, I think it meant our people costs were smaller and our facility costs were smaller, and we sort of weren't distracted with that. We could really focus on building the brand aspects of Bellroy.
And something you've mentioned to me, which I love, and I'm not sure where you get the saying from, there must be somewhere, or maybe you invented, was hungry for profit, patient for growth.
Yes.
But from those humble beginnings in the early teens, today we're a decade or so on, 12 or 13 years, and you've got 130 million of sales, and you've been able to fund it. You have some outside funding, but in those early days, you did it all of your own bat, applying your own capital, and somehow you were able to expand even beyond Australian shores. How did you achieve that?
So hungry for profit, patient for growth is definitely something that Matt, Andy and I loved from the beginning, and it is not ours, but I'm not going to be able to say where it's from, but I do want to say
I'm sure someone out there knows.
No, I feel there was a book that we loved called Good to Great.
I've read the book.
Is it? I don't know if it's there.
It could be in there.
I feel like Andy's squirming, saying.
I remember there was big, hairy, audacious goals came out of that.
Yeah. So that idea we had from, watching Fallshaw. This was a family business that was fully family funded, and we knew what it meant if we made too many of a particular product that didn't match demand. It meant the cash wasn't there when it needed to be. And so I think we'd watched in that business the disaster that not having profit could really bring. So
you start making more products, but somehow you end up in the USA and beyond, which for any business, that step, everyone can create a business. It's hard to take it to that next level. And what drove that? That's for a lot of people is the killer, that we don't get to that point.
Yeah, and I think looking at business in Australia, there is so much aspiration to succeed in the US. Like I feel like I just had that in the history of everything we did, and so much money spent chasing that goal but not achieving it. The thing that we saw with the Google advertising is that we were getting sales from all over the world. And we had an Australian warehouse, and we'd set up with FedEx to be our distributor, to ship our product. They weren't running the warehouse, but they were shipping the product, and they were able to ship everywhere. And that meant we were sending orders to Belgium or Spain or the US or Canada, and we could see that whatever we were doing with our marketing was starting to generate orders in the US. And so we had a warehouse here, and we thought, okay, if we could just set up a warehouse in the US, the way we did that was in someone's garage that we knew, who picked the orders and kind of ran a little 3PL business. And so we had a 3PL here, we had someone's garage in the US, we had the products that we were making, we were trying to tell great stories, and we had Google helping push the brand in the US. And that, I guess, really helped us make moves over there.
And they took you into Canada?
Into
Google, Europe as well?
Google sold us everywhere. So, yes, into Europe, in the UK, Canada. We were getting orders from Japan, Singapore, everywhere.
And were they going directly to customers? Or did you find that commercial brands, accessory shops, leather goods shops were starting to buy and they were appearing in shops or chains? Not
so much. It was those orders were very much direct to customers. And then for wholesale, it was more that we were building Australia, and then we would do trips to the US and try and set up stores in the US. Wholesale was much harder to grow globally, and still is. It's much more work, because while you can reach a consumer and explain the product and ship the product to them, and so we sell all over the world from a consumer perspective, actually for wholesale, you need a sales team. So we have a sales team in the US, and they do amazing work all through the US. And
have you broken the back of that yet, or is there a long way to go?
I'm going to say I think they've broken the back of it. That they are growing very strongly. Look, the thing I'll say that says to me we broke the back of it is that we're now stocked by Apple. They picked up their first product, our laptop caddy, in November last year, and just this month we've started with a product that's our tech kit on Apple as well. And I feel like without that US team, we wouldn't have been able to have the interactions and meet the requirements.
That sounds like potentially a lot of volume, which is terrific for business.
Yep.
How do you manufacture the goods and meet that demand?
You know, I mean, all credit to Apple. They have been fantastic at that. They are supply chain excellence. Their desire to understand our production capabilities, to forecast with us, to tell us what they expect the forecasts to be. They ask us for a range of what we can produce. They've really worked with us to understand what's our current demand and what do they expect they're going to generate and how do we scale this in a sustainable way. So they've been excellent.
So you feel comfortable about that? So there's a long roadway there.
I hope so. I mean, for us, we have admired Apple forever. We're always talking about, how Apple does a particular thing and they do so many great things. So we've admired them for a long time. And, I was looking on the Apple website last week, and for our tech kits, I think they call it a travel organizer, they feature the video that our creative team made on that site. And to see the work that our creative team did and the product that our, production and design team made on the Apple website as a product that they endorse when your question was, do you feel like you made it in the US? That's definitely one of the accounts that feels like it's a pretty good destination. Yeah, it's a pretty good place to be.
All right, let's switch to brand.
Yep.
Which I said I'd come back to. Creating a brand is interesting. I've always found it strange that brand people use loyalty. We've got loyal customers.
Yeah.
And they come back to us all the time. For example, people still fly Qantas and are loyal to Qantas when someone like me goes, well, I'm going to go to Melbourne or I'm going to go to Brisbane. The flight at the right time at the right price is what I don't care who the carrier is.
Yeah.
Brand just goes out the window, but people go back to the same cars. They go to creating that loyalty.
Yeah.
How does someone like Bellroy, which is, I know you create your own category, but it overlaps with a lot of other categories and competitive. There's a lot of European brands at the top end. There's brands through Asia and obviously in the US. How do you get that loyalty?
I mean, this was hard for us because we started with men's wallets. And the thing about that is that men need a wallet. And maybe they give a Christmas present occasionally, but
they're not great shoppers.
No. It's so I think we sort of we built the business and realized, okay, this is great that we're selling lots of wallets, but it doesn't matter how good our brand is. If we don't give this customer other things to buy, we can't capitalize on the brand that people really appreciate. I think, though, sort of to come back to the brand question, though, I think that what's going on with your airline story is that experience has become a commodity for you. Your problem that you're trying to solve is to get from A to B, and there's nobody in the market distinguishing themselves on the things that you value, that you're going to do anything other than choose time and money is probably what's going on. And, there might be one airline who's unreliable enough that you take them out of the list because you think, look, I can't be mucked around, but otherwise I don't care. And so then what we have to think about is how do we think about what the customer is looking to solve for? And I think our customer has a few different goals that if we can hit on them, then there's a chance that we solve their problems. And I think if we solve our customers' problems, then they will come back because they'll have a new problem that they need solved. And so we understand that some of our customers are very function-led. So they want to know how many pockets there are and what items will fit in which pockets and what is the capacity of the thing. And so part of what we need to do as our brand is really clearly give the customer the features that they need and communicate them. But other customers actually really care about how they look. and the style matters to them. You know, they, especially now with a bag, you're wearing that on your body and it's a very personal expression of who you are. And so some customers will really care about the materials that we choose or the colours or the way the fabric sits when the bag is a bit over full. Does it still kind of look like it's working? And so we actually, I think the way to have a brand that customers are loyal to is to solve customers' problems. And I think for our brand, we have different types of customers and we need to address them separately. So for the function-led customers, we need to hit all of their goals, but then what we can do is actually make them look good as well. And they didn't really prioritize that, but they kind of get a nice surprise later. The style-led customers, if we can show them a bag that they like the aesthetic of, and then they get it, and after a month, they're like, this is cool. I can find everything. Like, this is really good experience.
That practical component is important.
Then they kind of have this secondary delight. And so it's almost like you sort of understand what the customer wants that they really understand. But what we want to do is have products that give you something extra that you discover at week 2 and at, you know, at month 1 and month 6. And one of our favorite campaigns is Day 1, Day 1000, where we show products that have been used for 1,000 days. And we say day 1 is just the beginning of the journey with the Bellroy product. You know, it's shiny and it's new and it's perfect, but we sort of think that's not the good part. The good part's Day 1000 when you know it, you know every pocket, you know how to answer your phone immediately because it's always in the right spot, and you know where you store your transport card and you know where your water bottle is. And you
most of the time.
Well, hopefully.
I lose things regularly.
Well, but you didn't have a Bellroy bag. So maybe we could solve that problem.
Well, let's get to the customer.
Yeah.
You call yourselves, or maybe it's not you, but I've heard you say step up brand.
Yeah.
So not at the top end of really expensive, which we said before the Europeans tend to dominate, but definitely not the mass market of just hitting prices. You've suggested people who earn $50,000 US or more is a likely customer.
Yeah, and it was an interesting, we were trying to understand once we realised that we had a developed logistics network and we had a brand that was resonating internationally. We didn't want to use population as a way of assessing market because we felt like that's probably not a true representation. And so we used that proxy of like, we could get data on, you know, how many people in a country earned $50,000 a year US. And we thought, okay, that's probably someone who would be willing to spend a few $100, $300 on a bag that they might use for 12 months. You know, they would sort of have that in their budget. And so we ranked the countries of the world using that measure. On price points, we do describe ourselves as a step-up brand, and that term we actually made up, or Andy made that up. We feel like we're trying to price our product not at the point where what the customer is paying for is our brand marketing. So we're not putting a lot of money into glossy magazines and promoting our brand. We want our product and the people who endorse it to be the thing that drives the brand. So the price that we set is very much more driven by how much money does it cost to source the materials that we like, that have sort of the environmental credit that we think they should have, and to put the features in that the customer's going to value. And sometimes we get it wrong. You know, sometimes we'll spend an extra X amount of dollars putting on a certain feature, and what we can see is that the customer didn't actually value that feature as much as we thought it was a good feature. And that's a lesson for us that we didn't get the pricing right at that point. But for us, the pricing kind of happens in the specifying rather than in the pricing, because we're really thinking, how are we going to specify this product so it resonates with the customer? And
you're touching on their data.
Yeah.
And I said in the introduction, engineering background, or a couple of you have definitely been down that path.
Yeah.
Data's been important.
Very important.
And just give us a run through of what you look for, what data you try and access, how does it change what you're putting in the market?
So, I mean, the thing about an individual transaction happening in a warehouse that you don't exist in is that it can be quite hard without good data analysis to understand what the customer's actually doing and what's driving their behaviour. And so we're always looking at sort of standard data like sales and the number of units in an order and the average cart size and those sorts of things. But I think what we try and do is use data to model as if the website was a shop and a customer was walking into it, and we could watch them, walk over to this product, pick it up, put it down, and then we could watch them walk over here and say, oh, I quite like that one, I'll buy it. And we're trying to use data to model that concept. We do a lot of what's called A/B testing on our website. So we create a version A of the website and a version B of the website, and we randomize who sees what, and then we look at what the customer does. Do they buy more bags if we sort the menu item one way or another? Do they buy more, do they add a wallet to cart if we show recommendations of bags and wallets together? If we put a recommended product in the mini cart, do they buy more or do they buy less? We're trying to work out how can we make this shopping experience one where the customer says, this is what I want and this is what will be interesting to me. And it's not always the case that the thing that we think the customer will like, they actually like. So, once we design these beautiful icons for products, for like images for the navigation, I think we called them tasty icons or something. Like they were we just all loved them. I was so excited with it, and we were so sure it was going to be great. But we have a culture of A/B testing, so we would say, well, let's A/B test it and just check. And the customer didn't like it at all. They actually were distracted by it, and it didn't resonate. And sometimes we'll create something really interesting in the mini cart, but actually mucking around with the customer experience once they've chosen the product they want can have a really big impact on conversion rate. Because I think once the customer's done their shopping and chosen, and then you say, oh, do you want to add one of these? Sometimes the customer's like, in fact, do you know what? I'll have nothing, thank you. And so I think if you have a customer face-to-face, you can ask them, watch their behaviour, notice that you need to rearrange the shop, but we can't watch them. And so we try and create scenarios that mimic their preference, that mimic their behaviour and show us what their preferences are.
It sounds like too that it cuts problems off at the pass quite early if you're on top of that, if you're watching it closely.
Absolutely. I think when you have, we have a lovely office in Collingwood, lots of us working in there every day. I can see what the vibe of the place feels like by how, what kind of music's playing and how much people are chatting versus how much they're working quietly. I get a real sense of the thing. But I can't see by walking around the office what sales look like right now, that there's no visibility. Or is the website down and we're not selling anything? Or is a wholesale account having a terrible experience and they're never going to buy again? I can't see any of those things from our office without data.
But it does sound like good things in your family happen in Collingwood. So
I know, isn't that incredible?
Look, we've got a financial audience or listener group. So let's get back to some of the things you said earlier about growing profitably.
Yeah.
And there was one stage maybe 5 years ago where you did take some outside investors, but the founders have kept circa 85% of the business.
Yeah.
And today you sit here with the sales that we quoted before, 130 million. But there's obviously aspirations now that you've got the network globally, you've got a product line, there's momentum in the business, you want to grow a lot more. Are you comfortable about funding that going forward?
Yeah, I mean, that...
Because there's big aspirations there, I gather.
Hungry for profit, patient for growth is real, and it means that being profitable is important to us because it means that we can fund things that we want to try. I actually think that, we're not a high capital business. Like I've banged on about inventory quite a lot, right? Because it's our biggest asset. And so making sure we have money to buy inventory is really important. But otherwise, the business isn't especially capital intensive. The thing I think you need a good balance sheet for is to ride the waves. And that's the challenge of feeling brave enough to grow in a particular space or to employ a team in a particular location to do a thing that may or may not work, is when something challenging happens.
Like COVID?
Like COVID. I mean, this was where we raised the external capital because we'd just come out of the wallet space and we had bags growing at 100% year on year. Phone cases were at 100% year on year, and work accessories also. And we knew we'd been able to navigate it with wallets, but now all these new categories were starting to bloom, and we thought we'd probably need some expertise as well, as a little bit of capital to kind of fund all of this. And 6 months later, COVID happened. And what we had was a balance sheet that I remember when we were talking to people about raising that money, and like maybe we had $2 million in the bank or something, and people would say, how much money do you have? And I'd proudly say $2 million, and they'd say nothing, was the financial response. And I'd sort of deflate and think fabulous. But the funds that we raised, we had them primarily all unspent still on the balance sheet going into COVID. And so I think what became our battle cry in COVID was, we're going to go on the offensive when everyone else is playing defense, because this won't last forever. And I mean, while people are no longer moving about the world and not necessarily carrying things, what we could see in our sales data was there were little tiny pockets that were crazily outperforming the things that were not doing well. So big bags tanked. Nobody needed a 3-day backpack anymore. So those were not selling. But laptop sleeves were up 300%. And small carry, so like slings and side bags that perhaps you would put your mask and your sanitizer and like a few little bits and pieces to go to the shop and back, they were going really well. And so that was sort of a sign that, no, the business can still exist. We just have to be able to develop product locally a little bit more. So we invested in a whole lot of product development equipment. So rather than doing prototyping in our factories overseas, we would do more prototyping here and send them a finished prototype and say, okay, can you try and make one of these and see how it goes? But if we didn't have that balance sheet going into COVID, it would have been really difficult to feel confident to develop new product all through that period. And I think that what profitability ultimately brings, or capital, or however you get yourself that healthy sort of cash position, is it brings you control and optionality so that whenever the weird thing happens in the world, which will inevitably happen, you have the resources to weather a bit of a storm and then come out of it shaped correctly for what the world changed to.
All right, let's go out the other side of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Interest rates went to zero, or during COVID, but there was a bit of a boom in 2021.
Yeah.
You publicly said a few comments around it was slightly annoying that capital was free and businesses that probably didn't deserve it got some of that capital. Yeah,
and I think the way I'd articulate that, and I sort of back the statement, but I think the idea that feels like it didn't sit in my bones right was product businesses were not profitable and raising money as if they were tech businesses. And I think that a tech business can scale out of their costs. They don't have COGS. They don't have freight and logistics. They've primarily got like facilities, people, bank fees. They're sort of the things that are going to, I don't know, I've never run a big tech business, so I might be saying something idiotic. But
they're good at capitalising costs, the ones they do have.
Do they? Yeah. But they don't have the fixed cost piece that a product business does. It doesn't matter how much bigger you get. You might be able to negotiate a little bit on your product cost, but the product cost doesn't disappear. The freight and logistics costs don't disappear. And so I feel like while a $5 million product business maybe isn't quite profitable yet, there are some people costs that you need to sort of hold that perhaps are a little tricky at that point. By $10 million, you should be able to generate a profit. Like, I think that should be achievable for a product business, or the business model doesn't work. And certainly by 20 million, and certainly by 30 and 40 million, you at least need to be able to break even. And I think running a business that can't be break even, that is a product business, and funding it as if by the time it's going to get to 200 million, that problem will be solved. I just don't think the problem gets solved. And so something that we saw a lot of in our history was, why don't you market in the way those people do? Or why aren't you growing as quickly as those people are growing? And I think what we felt like we were looking at were businesses that were taking in so much cash that the revenue they were generating was almost equivalent to the cash that they'd brought in over the lifetime of the business, which felt so counter to what I think good business should look like. And so seeing a bit of pressure coming in that space feels like it will push businesses in a better direction.
So let's look forward. We got you maybe doubling, tripling. We're going to set the bar high. Mm-hmm. It's all in front of you. Not many good brand businesses on the Australian share market. Definitely not many accessory brands. Would you ever consider something like a public listing? Provides liquidity for the insiders. It can support the balance sheet. Is something like that, or that kind of path is not what you need, and it's better to keep everything under control yourself?
My learning is that it's very difficult to know what the right thing will be for the business in the future, and that what we want to do is be good stewards for Bellroy. We love the idea. We love seeing people using our product. And I think it's, we're running the business at the moment. We probably think we're the right people to be doing it. But at some point, we won't have the expertise that Bellroy needs, and somebody else might. And we might not be able to fund it, but maybe we can. And so I actually think I would never say would never list. Like, that sounds crazy, because the world can change in ways that we don't really predict or understand, and that might be the right thing for Bellroy at the time. It's not in our short to medium term horizon. I don't think that's what we want to do right now. But I do think I think there is a global example of many listed businesses that I think can perform well. I do think brands need to be nurtured over the long term. So that would be the thing that I find hard to believe would change, and that it's difficult over a 1 year, a 1 quarter horizon you need to make sure you're making decisions that understand that, in 5 or 3 years' time, what is the brand going to look like and what are the consequences of those decisions? And I think our incentives would be aligned with not putting Bellroy in a place where it lost the ability to optimise over the slightly longer term.
I can't defend the share market. They're not good at going past the next half or the next quarter, so it might be difficult. It's been a terrific career, and especially first half. We look forward to the second half, if we want to put it that way. So thanks for coming in. It's been a great story, great to listen to, and all the best for the future.
Thank you very much. It's been a very fun conversation.